I refuse to eat my niece's birthday cake. After she sneezed on it, now my entire family has turned against me. Now my aunt has uninvited us from family events. I, 34F, have been caught in a whirlwind of family drama following my niece Lily's 5F birthday party last weekend. My sister Elizabeth, 36F, and her husband Benjamin, 38M, adopted Lily 2 years ago under rather unusual circumstances, and this event has brought long simmering tensions to the surface. To fully understand the situation, I need to provide some backstory. Elizabeth and I grew up in a household where appearances were everything. Our parents were well-respected members of our small community, and they put immense pressure on us to maintain the family's pristine reputation. Elizabeth, being the older sibling, bore the brunt of this pressure. She was expected to excel in everything: academics, sports, social life. And for the most part, she did. I, on the other hand, was more of a free spirit. I struggled with the constant need for perfection and often rebelled against our parents' expectations. This dynamic created a rift between Elizabeth and me that lasted well into our adult years. Elizabeth always felt that I got away with things she never could, while I felt that she was the golden child, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. We loved each other, but there was always an undercurrent of competition and resentment. When we reached our late 20s, our paths diverged even further. I met my husband Tom, 35M, during a backpacking trip through Europe. We had a whirlwind romance and got married within a year, much to our parents' dismay. They thought it was too rushed, but Tom and I knew we were meant for each other. We quickly started our family and now have 3 kids: Emma, 10F, Ethan, 8M, and Oliver, 3M. Elizabeth, meanwhile, followed a more traditional path. She married her college sweetheart Benjamin in a lavish ceremony that our parents proudly hosted. Everyone expected them to start a family right away. But years passed with no baby announcements. Elizabeth confided in me that they were struggling with infertility, but she swore me to secrecy. Our parents, unaware of their struggles, constantly pestered them about when they would have children. The pressure took its toll on Elizabeth and Benjamin's marriage. They separated briefly about 6 years ago, and during that time, Benjamin had a brief relationship with a woman named Jessica. When Benjamin and Elizabeth reconciled a few months later, they thought they'd put that chapter behind them. But fate had other plans. 2 years after their reconciliation, Benjamin received a shocking call. Jessica had passed away during childbirth, leaving behind a newborn daughter, Lily. Benjamin was devastated by Jessica's death and overwhelmed at the prospect of raising a child alone. In a moment of crisis, he turned to Elizabeth for help. To everyone's surprise, Elizabeth agreed to adopt Lily. I think part of her saw this as her only chance to become a mother, while another part genuinely wanted to help Benjamin and this innocent child. Our parents were initially scandalized by the situation, but they quickly came around when they realized this was their chance to finally have a grandchild. The adoption wasn't easy. Elizabeth struggled with feelings of inadequacy and jealousy towards Jessica, even though she had passed. Benjamin grappled with guilt over his past infidelity and grief for Jessica. But somehow, they made it work. They presented a united front to the world, determined to give Lily a loving home. Which brings us to last weekend's birthday party. Elizabeth invited our whole extended family to celebrate Lily turning 5. It was meant to be a joyous occasion, a chance to show everyone how well they were doing as a family. I could tell Elizabeth had gone all out. Elaborate decorations, party games, and a fancy unicorn-themed cake that she mentioned several times had cost over $200. The party was going fine until it was time to sing "Happy Birthday" and cut the cake. As we gathered around, Lily got really excited and started bouncing up and down. Just as we finished singing, she let out an enormous sneeze right on top of the cake. It wasn't just a little spray. I'm talking a full-on, mucus-filled explosion all over the frosting and decorations. I was completely grossed out, and I could see my kids and some of the other guests recoiling in disgust. But Elizabeth just laughed it off and said, "Oh, Lily, you silly goose." She didn't even attempt to clean it up or remove the contaminated frosting. Instead, she started cutting slices and handing them out to everyone. When she got to our family, I politely declined and said we'd pass on the cake. Elizabeth looked confused and asked why. I tried to be tactful and said we were still full from lunch, but she kept pressing the issue. Finally, I admitted that I wasn't comfortable eating cake that had been sneezed on. Elizabeth's face immediately darkened. She accused me of being dramatic and said I was making a big deal out of nothing. She pointed out that Lily was family, so it shouldn't matter. I countered that even if it was my own child, I still wouldn't want to eat food they'd sneezed all over. It's just basic hygiene. Things escalated quickly from there. Elizabeth started ranting about how much the cake cost and how I was being ungrateful. She said I was setting a bad example for my kids by being so germophobic. I tried to defuse the situation by offering to take a small piece to go, but she wasn't having it. She demanded that we eat it right then and there to prove we weren't too good for Lily's cake. As Elizabeth got more worked up, I could see our parents exchanging worried glances. They've always hated any kind of public discord, and I knew they were probably more concerned about the scene we were causing than the actual issue at hand. Our mom tried to intervene, suggesting that maybe Elizabeth could just scrape off the top layer of frosting, but Elizabeth shot her down immediately. At that point, I'd had enough. I gathered up my family and told Elizabeth we were leaving. As we headed for the door, I could hear her complaining loudly to other relatives about how rude and stuck up I was being. I heard snippets about how I'd always thought I was better than everyone else, and how I clearly didn't accept Lily as part of the family. That last accusation stung the most. I love Lily and have always treated her the same as my other nieces and nephews. Just because I didn't want to eat a contaminated cake doesn't mean I love her any less. But I knew trying to argue that point with Elizabeth in her current state would be futile. Since then, I've been bombarded with angry messages from Elizabeth and other family members. They're saying I ruined Lily's birthday and hurt her feelings by refusing to eat her cake. Some are even dredging up old grievances, like how I abandoned the family by marrying Tom so quickly and moving away for a few years. Our parents called to express their disappointment in both of us for causing a scene. They suggested I should have just eaten the cake to keep the peace, saying, "Sometimes in a family, you have to do things you don't want to do." It's the same line they used on us throughout our childhood whenever we complained about attending boring family functions or putting on a happy face for appearances. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. Am I really the asshole for not wanting to eat sneezed on cake? Should I have just sucked it up to keep the peace? My husband thinks Elizabeth majorly overreacted, but now I'm starting to wonder if I handled it poorly. Part of me wonders if this is about more than just the cake. Elizabeth has always been sensitive about her parenting skills, given Lily's unique situation. Maybe she saw my refusal to eat the cake as a criticism of her ability to handle the situation. Or maybe this is just years of pent-up resentment finally boiling over. I'm at a loss for how to proceed. I don't want this to drive a permanent wedge between us, but I also don't think I should have to apologize for not wanting to eat contaminated food. How do I navigate this minefield of family dynamics without completely alienating my sister or compromising my own principles? Oida, Update 1. It's been about a week since Lily's birthday party, and unfortunately, things have only gotten worse with my family. I really appreciated all the feedback on my original post, so I wanted to give you an update on the situation. The day after I posted, Elizabeth called me in tears. At first, I thought she was going to apologize, but it quickly became clear that wasn't the case. She accused me of posting about the incident on social media. I hadn't. This anonymous Reddit post was the only place I'd mentioned it. Apparently, one of Lily's friends' moms had overheard our argument at the party and posted about it in a local parents' Facebook group. The post had gone viral in our small town, with most people siding against Elizabeth. Elizabeth was furious and blamed me for ruining her reputation and embarrassing Lily. I tried to explain that I hadn't said anything publicly, but she wouldn't listen. She then started bringing up old grievances from our childhood, accusing me of always being the perfect daughter and making her look bad. I was shocked. We've always had our issues, but I thought we'd moved past most of our childhood rivalries. Elizabeth brought up specific incidents I'd long forgotten about, like the time I won the lead in the school play over her, or when our parents praised my SAT scores more than hers, even though we got similar results. It was clear she'd been harboring these resentments for years. The conversation devolved into a screaming match, with Elizabeth eventually hanging up on me. I was upset, but I figured we both needed some time to cool off. However, things only got worse from there. The next day, my mom called to tell me that Elizabeth had uninvited our entire family from my nephew Max's, Elizabeth's older son, 8M, upcoming baseball game. Max had been excited for us to watch him play, and now he was confused and upset. I felt terrible for him getting caught in the middle of this ridiculous drama. Then, Elizabeth started posting vague, passive-aggressive comments on Facebook about fake family members and people who think they're better than everyone else. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Several relatives commented in support of her, saying things like, "Blood is thicker than water," and "family should always come first." I was hurt and frustrated, but I decided to take the high road and not engage online. Instead, I reached out to Elizabeth privately and suggested we meet for coffee to talk things out. She left me on read and never responded. The final straw came yesterday when my daughter Emma came home from school in tears. Apparently, Elizabeth had told Max and Lily not to play with my kids at recess anymore because we were bad influences. Emma was devastated. She and Max have always been close, and she couldn't understand why her aunt would do this. To make matters worse, I received a call from Emma's teacher expressing concern about the situation. She'd noticed the sudden rift between the cousins and wanted to make sure everything was okay at home. I was mortified having to explain that it was all because of a disagreement over birthday cake. This whole situation has brought back a lot of painful memories from our childhood. Growing up, Elizabeth and I were often pitted against each other by our parents' expectations. If one of us succeeded at something, it was always framed as a failure for the other. I thought we'd moved past that as adults, but clearly, those old wounds run deep. I'm also worried about the impact this is having on Lily. She's been through so much already with losing her birth mother, and now this situation is causing more instability in her life. I want to support her, but I don't know how to do that without enabling Elizabeth's behavior. My husband thinks we should cut contact with Elizabeth entirely, at least for a while. Part of me agrees, but I'm worried about the long-term consequences. Our family has always been close-knit, despite our issues. The thought of completely severing ties feels drastic. I'm considering reaching out to Benjamin, Elizabeth's husband, to see if he can help mediate the situation. He's generally more level-headed than Elizabeth, and he might be able to see things from a different perspective. But I'm worried that might just make things worse if Elizabeth sees it as me going behind her back. Our parents have been oddly silent since the initial fallout. I suspect they're hoping if they ignore the problem, it will go away on its own. That's always been their approach to family conflict: sweep it under the rug and pretend everything's fine. I'm at a loss for how to proceed. I never wanted things to get this out of hand, and I'm desperate to find a way to resolve this for everyone's sake, especially the kids. But I also don't want to compromise my principles, or teach my children that it's okay to let people walk all over you, just to keep the peace. Any advice on how to handle this moving forward would be greatly appreciated. How do I balance maintaining my own boundaries with preserving family relationships? Is there any way to get through to Elizabeth? Or should I just accept that our relationship might be permanently damaged? And how do I protect my kids from the fallout of all this adult drama? Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some new developments in the ongoing saga with my sister Elizabeth. First, the good news. Benjamin, Elizabeth's husband, did end up reaching out to me a couple of weeks ago. He apologized for not intervening sooner and said he'd been trying to talk sense into Elizabeth behind the scenes. Apparently, he thought the whole cake incident was ridiculous too, but he didn't want to undermine Elizabeth in front of everyone at the party. Benjamin suggested we all get together for a family dinner to clear the air. I was hesitant, given how things had escalated, but I agreed it was worth a try. We met at a neutral location, a local restaurant, last weekend. The dinner started off tense, with Elizabeth barely making eye contact with me. But as we got to talking, it became clear that the cake incident had just been the straw that broke the camel's back. Elizabeth confessed that she'd been feeling overwhelmed and insecure about her parenting, especially with Lily's unique situation. She admitted that she overreacted at the party because she felt like I was judging her parenting skills. We had a long, emotional conversation about our childhood and the pressures we both felt growing up. Elizabeth revealed that she'd always felt like she was living in my shadow, constantly trying to measure up to what she perceived as my effortless success. I was able to share my own insecurities and the ways I'd felt inadequate compared to her. It wasn't a magic fix for everything, but it felt like a step in the right direction. We agreed to work on communicating more openly and to try to support each other instead of competing. Elizabeth even apologized for telling the kids not to play together at school. Now for the not-so-good news. While Elizabeth and I were making progress, a new issue cropped up with our extended family. Our Aunt Karen, Mom's sister, decided to throw an impromptu family reunion barbecue last week. She invited everyone, except me and my immediate family. When I found out about it, through a Facebook post of all things, I was hurt and confused. I reached out to Karen to ask if there had been some mistake with the invitations. Her response floored me. She said that she'd heard about the drama I caused at Lily's party, and she didn't want to risk me making a scene at her event. She then launched into a lecture about how family should always come first, and how I needed to learn to let things go, for the sake of harmony. I was speechless. Not only was Karen misrepresenting what had happened, but she was actively excluding us based on secondhand gossip. When I tried to explain the situation, she brushed me off and said, "I don't want to get involved in your squabbles." The worst part is, several other family members have taken Karen's side. I've received messages from cousins and other aunts' uncles saying they agree with Karen's decision and that I need to apologize to Elizabeth, even though Elizabeth and I had already started to work things out. It feels like this whole situation has snowballed into something much bigger than a disagreement over birthday cake. Now it's turning into a referendum on my place in the family, and I'm not sure how to handle it. I'm trying to stay positive and focus on rebuilding my relationship with Elizabeth, but it's hard when I feel like the rest of the family is turning against me. Benjamin has been supportive and says he'll talk to Karen, but I'm not sure how much good it will do at this point. I'm considering taking a step back from family events for a while to let things cool down, but I'm worried that might just reinforce the narrative that I'm the problem. Plus, I don't want my kids to miss out on time with their cousins and other relatives. This whole ordeal has made me realize how much unresolved tension there is in our family. It's like the cake incident opened up a Pandora's box of old resentments and unspoken grievances. I'm starting to wonder if we need some kind of family therapy to work through all of this. In the meantime, I'm focusing on my own little family unit. Tom has been incredibly supportive through all of this, and we've been making an effort to create positive experiences for our kids to counteract all the drama. Any advice on how to navigate this new family dynamic would be much appreciated. How do I maintain boundaries without completely alienating myself from the family? And how do I explain all of this to my kids in a way that doesn't damage their relationships with their relatives? Update 3. It's been about 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share the latest developments in this ongoing family saga. After the drama with Aunt Karen's barbecue, I decided to take a step back from family events for a while. It wasn't an easy decision, but I felt like I needed some space to process everything that had happened. During this time, I focused on strengthening my immediate family bonds. We had weekly game nights, went on weekend hikes, and generally tried to create positive memories amidst all the stress. It was really healing, and it reminded me of what's truly important. About 3 weeks into our family retreat, I received an unexpected call from my mom. She was in tears, apologizing for not standing up for me sooner. Apparently, she'd finally heard the full story from Benjamin and realized how out of hand things had gotten. She promised to talk to Aunt Karen and the rest of the family to set the record straight. True to her word, my mom became my biggest advocate. She called a family meeting, minus me and Elizabeth, and laid out everything that had happened, from the initial cake incident to the misunderstandings that followed. She made it clear that the family's behavior had been unacceptable and that they owed me an apology. To my surprise, most of the family was receptive. Many of them reached out to me privately to apologize, admitting that they'd jumped to conclusions without knowing the full story. Aunt Karen was the last holdout, but even she eventually sent a grudging apology text, though I'm not sure how sincere it was. As for Elizabeth, our relationship has slowly been improving. We've been having weekly coffee dates to talk things through, and we've made a pact to communicate more openly in the future. She's also started seeing a therapist to work through some of her insecurities about parenting Lily, which I think has been really positive for her. The kids are doing better too. Emma and Max are back to being best buddies, and Lily seems happier now that the tension between the adults has eased. We even had a small do-over birthday party for Lily last weekend, complete with a cake that thankfully remained sneeze-free. While things aren't perfect, they're definitely improving. We're all learning to be more understanding and to give each other the benefit of the doubt. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of our family relationships. This whole experience has taught me a lot about the complexities of family dynamics and the importance of clear communication. It's also made me realize how much unresolved tension can simmer beneath the surface in families, waiting for a catalyst to bring it all to light. I'm still working on finding the right balance between maintaining my boundaries and being part of the family. It's not always easy, but I believe it's worth the effort. After all, at the end of the day, family is family, sneezes, drama, and all. I'm curious to see how things will continue to evolve from here. Will these improved relationships last, or will old habits creep back in? Only time will tell, I suppose. For now, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time and appreciate the progress we've made. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this ordeal. Your perspectives helped me navigate some really tough conversations and decisions. I hope that by sharing my story, it might help others dealing with similar family conflicts.